Hello and welcome to All Stats, Aren't We? A podcast in which Leeds fans cast their combined eye over goings on at Elm Road, giving scrutiny to the underlying statistics and tactical footings at work at Leeds United. I'm Adam Elliott. The good decision making of Brendan Aronson of the podcast. That's good, Brendy. Keep that up. And I'm joined today by the bad decision making of Brendan Aronson of the podcast. This man knows all about bad decisions. It's Martin Riley. Martin, how are you doing?
I'm not doing so badly, thank you, Adam. I've had a relatively chill day at home as usual for a Tuesday. We are recording at a different time to normal, so I've not had my tea, but I have just had my lunch and I had a noodle sandwich, a student special. So yeah, very healthy. How about you, mate? How are you doing?
That's a Will Clay special. To be fair, I don't actually think Will's the kind of student to have eaten that, but sounds like it. Yeah, I'm well. I also just had my lunch. I had a sweet chili chicken wrap, not one that was shop bought, one that was homemade with loads of little bits of salad in it. Very healthy lunch, not pasta, as anyone else screaming at me for all the pasta I've eaten over the years of doing this podcast. It was not pasta, but that's because I had lunch. I'm having pasta for tea. But yeah, I'm well. Yeah, it's nice to record when there's some daylight, even though it's an absolute miserable day and there is a storm currently going on in the UK, which is very windy and very gusty and very rainy. So I'm glad to be inside right now, although I have a run planned for this evening, so that's not going to be fun. We're here today, obviously, to discuss the game we just watched last night, Monday Night Football, under the lights at the Hill Dickinson Stadium, not Goodison Park, where Leeds United got a 1-1 draw, which is fabulous news. The only other piece of news to discuss is Goodmanson, Martin, who it sounds like he was meant to be out for, I think it was basically 3 or 4 weeks, but it's looking more optimistic than that. It might only be another couple of games that he misses. So that's good news with some bad. And Beale's out for similar, so we might get them both back at around the same time. But everyone else seems all right. So is it okay? Are we kind of glad that we've got out of this because it's Christmas period, it's cold as well, the winter, and you normally pick up more injuries during that spell. Are we pretty glad that we've come out of this with not too many injuries and we managed to put ourselves together still all right?
Yeah, it's good that it's coming now because it would just mean that they'll miss less overall games. Because they'll only miss 2-3 games at most, probably. Whereas if it was over the Christmas period where they got injured, they could have potentially missed 5 games over the same 2-week period. So yeah, it's better that it's now, but I would have preferred them to not get injured at all. But that's not going to happen. It's the highest intensity league in the world. You're going to pick up injuries. So yeah, we do have the cover to be able to cope with it, I think. We'll just have to see how things go. Hopefully we don't get any further ones to add on top of them anytime soon.
Yeah, especially in defensive areas, because we're broadly fine in most other areas, aren't we? And hopefully Gudmundson's quicker than it says, because everyone's clamouring for a left back or left wing back, and I can see the merit in doing that, but I don't know, at the same time, there's a good chance they come in and then suddenly Gudmundson's back fit and they are rooted to the bench. I think if we were going to do it, I think we'd actually need to go and get kind of another utility player, another kind of versatile option that can play a few different roles. I have an idea of a player that I think would work. So just to throw a name out there, like a left-footed centre mid who has played left wing back or left back in his career, like Alexander Prass at Hoffenheim, funnily enough, the same club as Stack was at. Someone like that might make some sense. I'm not saying we are linked to him. I'm not making a transfer rumour. Please don't go online and start talking about this. But that's the kind of thing I think would make more sense than signing an out-and-out specialist there. I think we'll probably be fine otherwise. But I get it because Harrison's left and it leaves a bit of a hole on that side of the pitch. Anyway, like and subscribe on YouTube. Hello, we are still on there in the middle of the day when there's actually some light, which is nice. And extra content is on Patreon, where we have a Buonanotte article. Hopefully there'll be another article about another signing at some point in the next week. Hopefully we make one. And you'll also find a podcast about Harry Gray. I said Archie last time and I nearly said it again there, but Harry Gray and his potential development and what his ceiling is and all of that sort of stuff. So go over there and listen. If you haven't already subscribed, go subscribe and then listen. Thank you. Anyway, let's get into this, shall we? because we have a time schedule for this one, so we have to stick to that. Leeds approached the game in a 3-5-1 shape, with Everton opting for a 4-2-3-1 initially. Much of the first half, Leeds had the better of possession, also having the better of the chances being created as well, with Everton only threatening from set-piece situations early on and moments when we made a mistake. Leeds opened the scoring in the 28th minute when Jayden Bogle and Anton Stack combined in the right flank, with Stack put across into the box, which went by Leeds and Everton players to eventually see James Justin come onto it after breaking into the box late and finish hard past Jordan Pickford. Leeds then continued to look more likely to score, having a shot from Calvert-Lewin hit the post. Leeds had to withstand some pressure from Everton, but actually saw out the first half fairly comfortably in the end. But then Everton made changes at half-time, with David Moyes switching formation, and in the opening spells of the half, both sides had spells of possession, and after 15 minutes, Everton were in the ascendancy, having most of the chances and possession, which eventually told in the 76th minute when Tiano Barry finished from Idrissa Gana Gue's cross to level the scores. Following the goal, Leeds did look to respond, but struggled until the subs were made in the 85th minute. Leeds were able to get a hold of the game at this point and looked more likely to score and win the game. However, it ended 1-1 in the end. I forgot to add the stats, so give me 4 seconds.
One sec, I've got them.
Okay, go.
There you
go. So in the end, Everton had 58% of the ball to Leeds' 42%, despite our first half dominance. In terms of the expected goals figures and the shots figures, Leeds had the better of the shot count with 14-10, 4 shots on target to 3, and 2 big chances missed in the end, 3 big chances overall. Everton only had 1 big chance, which was their goal, I believe. And then the expected goals figure, as I say, 1.38 for Leeds and 0.7, so almost half for Everton in the end. Okay, then. Let's start off with some good. In the first half, we limited the Toffees really well, and they barely created anything, only allowing them to create 0.15 expected goals, most of which came in the first 5 minutes, really. While we created an XG figure of 1.11 of our own. What were we actually doing well in the first half, Martin? How were we able to do that?
So first of all, we were doing a good job of limiting Everton's touches around our box when they did get into the final third. Our box defenders were doing well to keep it out of that danger area, so that's one thing that we were doing well. Also, our forward press was working well and stealing the ball in advanced areas quite frequently, especially the likes of Anton Stack and Jayden Bogle especially had quite a few turnovers in the first half, and we just generally caused problems for Everton with our physicality, and they weren't able to match up to us. And we also didn't really engage with the press which they had on there. They were looking to press us quite aggressively in the opening spells of the game, but we largely just went over that press. It wasn't a bad press, to be fair, from Everton. It could have caused us problems, but because we have that outlet in Calvert-Lewin, we can go along to him all day, and generally he will do well, even up against the likes of Jake O'Brien, who's 6'7", however massive he is.
7.
Yeah, and even against him, he did well. Sometimes he lost out, sometimes he won, but that's natural, really, when someone's taller than you. But yeah, we did a good job throughout the first half. The approach was good. I can't have any complaints about the way the first half went. A lot of players had really good performances, especially Anton Stack, both in and out of possession, was really good. Was just really putting himself around and covering so much distance. That's one thing you've got to say, that he really did well in this, and I really wish we had those kind of stats for how much distance was being covered, because I have a feeling he put out so much in this game, even though he went off around the 80th minute, whatever it was. I still think he will have put out loads of kilometres in this one.
Indeed, I actually think Ethan Ampadu played same applies really to him. I thought he was everywhere in the first half. Then they were both just eating the ground up, which they're both very good at. As you say, that was kind of what gave us that dominance. The minor complaint I have, and it is minors before anyone bites my head off, is I didn't think our build-up was very good, and it did get caught out a couple of times, particularly Bornau, Rodon a couple of times, and Gruev on at least one occasion as well. Those 3 were probably the biggest culprits for it. But most of the time it was fine, because, as you say, if Everton's press was good and our build-up looked a bit shaky, which it did, we just went long a lot of the time and it was fine, because we knew that Calvert-Lewin was going to make quite a lot of those kind of balls. It will surprise no one to hear for the second week in a row that Calvert-Lewin in this game had the most duels attempted, and I think it's 20 odd. I can't remember the exact figure. I'll probably find it towards the end of the pod, but it was far more than any other player. He didn't actually win loads and loads of them, but the point is that he contests them. It makes it difficult, and all of our best attacking moments came from, well, nearly all of them came from direct balls up to him, which he'd either win or the ball would come loose to one of our players. And it was just really good. I think we were positioned really well with the midfield to counter press as well. So everything like that was just spot on. And credit to Farke, because we're probably going to discredit him in some ways a bit later on, but certainly have to give him credit for the first half and how that played out, because it was spot on and it forced Everton to tweak things. So that's good. Speaking of those tweaks then, Martin, what changes did Everton make to influence the second half? And the reason I want to ask this is because I think a lot of fans for Leeds have said that the second half change was actually from us as well. A lot of fans were saying that we sat in and that we were deep. I've seen a lot of people saying that, but was it just that simple, or was there more of a shift from Everton which forced us to be deep? How do you see it?
So, yeah, there was definitely a change which Everton made. Dwight McNeil and Armstrong went off at half-time, and they brought on Branthwaite and Kieran Dewsbury-Hall, and to change the shape to 3-4-3. You had Branthwaite obviously going into the back line, Patterson and Mikolenko were the wing-backs, and you had the midfielders were still the same ones. Garner and Gay were still there at the midfield too. And then behind Barry up front, there was Dewsbury Hall and Ndai. I think that the reason why they did this was to try to give them more possibilities in build-up and to try to keep hold of the ball with better success, because we did cause some problems with our pressing in the first half. And it also served another function as well, giving them more bodies in their defensive area to deal with the threat that Calvert-Lewin was posing from these aerial battles when we were going long over their press.
Branthwaite is huge, by the way. Like, they have already got Tarkowski and O'Brien are massive, but Branthwaite is also about 6'5" himself. So
exactly. So yeah, they brought him on to give them more options to win those duels, and also to have more players to challenge for second balls as well when the ball did come loose after the initial aerial challenge. And I think that was the biggest factor for me, was that in that one individual thing, because that's how we were getting up the pitch so often in the first half, was going long, where we would not all lose the aerial duel. Picking up second balls was important for us in the first half, and we just weren't able to do that as easily in the second half. And in the first 10-15 minutes it was kind of even, but the more it wore on, the easier Everton found it to have to get the foot on the ball and get into our half, and we couldn't respond and couldn't get out really at times. Between the 60th and 75th minute, it was quite bad around that period. Obviously that culminated in them scoring the goal. Also with regards to us, I think we were a little bit less aggressive than the first half. I wouldn't say we were totally passive. There were definitely still moments where we were trying to press, especially in those first 15 minutes. But I think because of the control Everton got, we weren't able to impose ourselves as much further up the pitch, and also not having the bodies there as well to counter the change Everton made in their build-up. Having more players there to build up and pass the ball around, it just meant that we weren't able to disrupt them as well as what we were doing in the first half.
Yeah, I was a stat actually before the game about Calvert-Lewin pressures, but he's now got 3 strikers against him on his own. And as a pressing unit, it didn't make as much sense for us. We probably needed to go, with another couple of forwards that could help him in that area, but he didn't have it. The other function that it served, because you said there were 2 things, I actually think there was a third one, was that in the first half, our main areas of success were either going long to Calvert-Lewin or getting the ball into the wing-backs. And they had a lot of space to work. Sometimes they didn't have enough players to combine with, and that was definitely a problem at times for both players, depending on where Brendan Aronson was. It's not Brendan Aronson's fault he can't play on both wings at once, but it just meant that he didn't always have options in front of Justin and Boga. But what they did have is kind of some space to work, and it was forcing the fullbacks for Everton to engage a bit higher. Whereas this natural formation shift meant that they could engage higher in the correct position, if that makes sense. They were, in the first half, it was like their fullbacks having to come out towards Bogle and Justin leave gaps in behind when they've only got a 2-man defence, whereas the wing-backs meant that they could force themselves higher, naturally and have a 3-man defence as part of the rest defence, which is a lot easier to deal with us. And that meant that every time we went for an outball in the second half and it didn't get Calvert-Lewin, didn't win the flick on or didn't win the battle, it came back at us pretty easily because their wing-backs were better positioned, their midfielders were better positioned to win those 50-50s, as you said. So we needed to make a change. And that's where we're going to come to now. What could we have done to counter it, Martin, is the broad question. But, a lot of people are going to praise Farke for the first half, but equally, I've seen a lot of criticism for the second. I think there's probably been a bit of a split from what I've seen on Twitter and Blue Sky. I think I've seen more people criticising on Twitter than praising, and more people praising than criticising. Realistically, I think it needs some both, and we've already done the praise for the first half. It's time to do a bit of criticism for the second, and we'll start off with this stat before you answer the question, which is that Leeds have now dropped 15 points from winning positions in the Premier League this season. Only Bournemouth have dropped more. That split is quite funny. Villa, Newcastle, Forest, we all lost, 9 points dropped. Bournemouth, Man United and Everton, 6 points dropped. And interesting, the games are split between away and home pretty equally. We've won 7 points from losing positions, but 15 dropped from winning positions is not great to say out loud. Martin, so what could we have done to counter the change from Everton?
What was it? What I said during the halftime break?
Yeah.
In our
Unfortunately, we have to pat ourselves on the back a bit in admin's chat. I can hear Paul's alarm going off as I've just said that. Because we all kind of said the same thing. You and, I won't name names, but you and someone else said the same thing, basically. So go on.
That we should switch to back four to try to help us attack better and also put more pressure on their back line, having more bodies in the forward areas. It was quite a simple thing to change it to, and it was eventually the change that Daniel Farke did make, but he just made it 20 minutes later than what he should have done. I know I said it at half-time, but I wasn't really wanting it from half-time. It would be nice, but after the game got started and within 15 minutes, I was saying, look, we need to make these changes. We need to make this change. We need to either go to a 4-3-3 or a 4-2-3-1 or even a 4-4-2. There's something which would give us more ways of getting up the pitch and sustaining the ball up there as well, because that was the issue, because we weren't able to win the second ball without having less bodies around because of Everton's change, to having more bodies in that area. We needed to make that change, and that didn't happen. And I think looking at the points that we've dropped here, I think you can put some of them at Daniel Farke's door. Like this game, I do think that we could have made changes and maybe kept the win. It's not guaranteed, of course. There was risks to going with a back four, which Daniel Farke alluded to in the press conference afterwards, that he didn't want to take that risk. But I just feel sometimes you do have to take those risks. And I think in this one, we had the players to be able to sort of go blow to blow with Everton and probably come out on top of that and potentially score before they were able to themselves. Whereas in the other games where we dropped points against Newcastle, it was the opposite approach which was required. Maybe stepping on Sosa's the next question here, so I'll cut that chat out there. But yeah, in this one, the change was to go with a back four shape, no matter what the shape of that around the rest of it, as long as we had more ways of both attacking and defending from the front.
I personally think 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1, not 4-4-2, even though that suggestion's not stupid. In terms of positioning of the forward players to not go man-to-man, but at least have the right pressing structure on their centre-backs. You wanted 3 forwards to be able to pressure them. We didn't have that. I think that's a problem. Like you said, you can't say that every single one of those games that we drop points in is entirely on Farke, because it's not. There is a quality gap between us and a lot of Premier League teams. Some teams are, some of those games Farke could have done stuff differently and we still would have dropped those points, because the quality gap between some of the teams is just too big, too vast. And it's not just hindsight to say it either, though, is it? To say that we could have done something differently here, because we all saw what happened after the 85th minute and how we improved, and we'll probably talk about that again in a bit, but that just goes to show that he should have made the subs earlier. I don't really get it, and I also think people are overrating Everton a little bit, so this is what I mean. Like, some teams you can understand it with, but Everton had Grealish out, Kieran Dewsbury-Hall and Njai and Gay are either back from AFCON just now or injuries or whatever else. Branthwaite hasn't played a league game since May. This was his first one of the season. Like, they weren't in fantastic shape. They had key players missing or that were coming back from injury. this was a decent time to play them. And I know we had Goodmanson and Beale out ourselves, you can say that, but I still think we were in better shape than them to go and attack the game. On our preview, we said, me and Martin, actually stylistically, Everton probably quite a good matchup for us in terms of our game plan and how that can play out. And so that's why I was frustrated that we didn't manage to get hold back of the game at the times said. They are fifth bottom for expected points, and I don't think expected points is the be-all and end-all, but I don't think the league table also is reflective of Everton this season. They're just not as good as people think they are. They're not scary. Their home form hasn't been great. This was their fourth draw. They've got 4 wins and 4 defeats. That's not a crazy record, is it, considering what they were like at Goodison all those years? And that was the foundation that they built survival on. So I don't think we can just say, oh, it's Everton and accept that there's a draw there. This was a game that we could have won and it was there for the taking. And the first half shows that we could have won it had we just tweaked ourselves in the second. And so just to a final point on this to kind of illustrate what we're talking about, Martin said in the first kind of 15, 20 minutes, you kind of feel the team out. So you didn't need to make the subs at half time like they did. They made their changes. We had that 15-minute grace period where you can see kind of how things are playing out. In that 15-minute period, we didn't have a shot, but they didn't have many of them themselves either. We had our first shot of that half in the 61st minute. The time when it needed to change was somewhere between the 61st minute after that shot and about the 75th or 76th minute when they scored. Because, and Farkas admitted it, as you said he was tempted to make the change earlier and switch to a 4-3-3, but he felt with the clean sheet, holding past 70 minutes, last week's clean sheet in their heads, Everton being kept at bay and going to back four, it would have been too risky. But we didn't have a shot between the 61st and 88th minute of the match, which is crazy considering in the first half we had 10 shots and we had 4 in the second. 3 of them came after the 88th minute. So after those changes were made, you see the actual difference tangibly in the fact that we ended the game stronger, the fact that they didn't know how to deal with our shape change and where players suddenly were picking up the ball. You saw Buonanotte and Okafor picking the ball up in dangerous areas and being able to drive into quite a lot of space. So they didn't know where to have their players and position them, and it improved us. So imagine if we'd done that on, let's say, 70 minutes, as Farkas said, they might not have scored. We might have even gone and got a second, and it might have been 2-0. And I know these are all hypotheticals, but I truly think this one was a bit of a waste opportunity more than all those other 15 points we've dropped. So, yeah, we've credited Fark on this pod, but I did want to say that, and I think it's completely fair criticism, and I hope we don't get any, people moaning about it, because we've had quite a lot of moaning about it when we dig him out, at times this season. But I think it's very, very fair. There is something to be said of perhaps he's scared of making changes when we're not behind. I think we've seen kind of a lot of evidence of this last couple of seasons, to be frank. If we're drawing or winning, he tends to not want to change too much because he thinks the team's functioning well. I don't necessarily think that that's how you should be as a manager. I think you need to be a bit more proactive. But we've done subs to death, haven't we, Martin, on this podcast with Farker? It has been our main gripe since season 1, since pretty much the first games in August of that season. It's not really changed all that much. Even when he's had insane options on his bench, he's not really changed all that much. So the question then is, because I've just gone on to talk about quite a lot of Farker criticism, are we now putting in Farker in a position where he just can't win, Martin? Because we say he should go more attacking in this one, but as you said, against Newcastle, we said the opposite, and we said actually he needed to make a change that was probably more defensive. He probably needs to bring Bornau on earlier, for example, we said in that one. So are we just being contrary, and is it unfair, and saying the opposite of what Farker does is the right approach? I don't think we are personally, but what's your thoughts?
Well, no, I don't think that's the case, because each individual match is individual and each opponent is different, and they have to be responded to in different ways. It's not one size fits all for each opponent that we play against. Newcastle have much more firepower in their side than what Everton do. So I don't think it's unfair to say that we could probably match them. If you look at the players who were on the pitch, at least by the end of the game when we'd made our subs, we had Buonanotte, we had Calvert-Lewin, and we had Okafor on there. And their main threats were really Ndiaye and Barry. Dewsbury Hall was doing good in the getting the ball circulated, but the main goal threats were those two, I would say. Yeah. So we were able to match them, and I think if we would have made those changes, bring on Buonanotte, bring on Okafor that little bit sooner, bring on Longstaff to help with the opposite side of things and impose ourselves on them a bit more. Same for Tanaka. which we'll get on to Tanaka a bit later, but that was a poor choice of sub at the time, I think. But yeah, I do think that it's unfair to say that we're being contrary, because each opponent is different and unique, and there's always going to be changes that make. And yeah, hindsight is a wonderful thing, but when we are saying these things before they happened, it's not us saying it after the fact. We're saying it during the match.
You said it at half time. You said it before it even became a problem.
Exactly. So it's not like we're just saying the opposite of what's happened. You can see these things could develop if we don't make the right changes. And yeah, we've gone on about the issue with Farke making sub late too often, so I don't want to labour on that too much. But it has cost us points in games this season. Not all of those points that we've dropped have been at Farke's door. There's, like you said yourself, the players we've got they have got flaws because of the position of the club we are. We're not going to be able to sign players who are perfect. We're going to have to compromise on some part of their game. But yeah, we love all the players, but we can't say that they haven't made mistakes. And some of them are on the players, some of them are on Farke. But yeah, but we do really appreciate the job that Farke has done. I want to say that, and the changes that he's made are what we was asking for, and he's done that. So great. So he can have all the praise he wants for that, but he also has to accept a bit of criticism in moments like these too.
Yeah, the fact that he's made the changes that we were wanting, around the time of that Man City game is great, but now the problem is more the in-game stuff. So the broader macro of the shape and the tactics is better, but the micro of a singular game is still a little bit of an issue, and I think that's fair, and that's why he deserves plenty of credit for how the season's evolved, and still some criticism for those individual matches. And so, yeah, I was disappointed here. And you know what else, Martin? It's a really small point, but in your opinion, would we have won the game if we had the players that we put on late on for longer, if we'd had them on for 15, 20, 25 minutes longer? Because I think Dan's said this. He said, I quite like the dynamic of the Okafor, Calvert-Lewin, Buonanotte front three last night towards the end. We only got about 8 minutes of it, but it looked promising. In that spell, we had way more of the territory. If you want to go look at the momentum graph yourselves, they're on FOTMob. We had way more of the territory and way more of the chances, and it was just, really, really much better for us. And, if we'd done it sooner, you'd think it would have probably made a difference, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. The players who got brought on, Buonanotte was lively, Okafor also was. They both helped us to get up the pitch and attack with more fluidity and just able to get at Everton more. If you look at the match momentum graphs, things that you see on FOTMob, you can see the difference as soon as that change was made, that we were all over Everton. And before that spell is there. You should know what I mean. If you've ever seen one of the match momentum graphs, it's got like lines on like a graph up and down for each side, and ours was pointing all the way upwards nicely. And so when those changes were made, and I think if we would have brought them on, even if it was just 10 minutes sooner, then it could have made a big difference in this game.
Yeah, we had 3 shots from the 88th to 95th minute of our 14 in the match. So it just shows we were definitely the more dominant, and we looked like the most likely to score. So anyway, we'll move on to the second half of the analysis in just a second. So then, as always, we conceded a goal. No, we haven't, as always, Martin. We've actually kept some clean sheets recently, but this was a game we conceded a goal in. So, despite Everton only having a few half chances and us box defending pretty well, I know we were critical of the period from the 60th minute to the 80th minute, or I was certainly. But, in that spell, they didn't have loads and loads of chances. They just had a lot of territory, but they did eventually get the goal, and it did feel like it was coming despite a lot of the chances before it being half chances. So was it more likely to be our left-hand side, or was there more to it than that? So who, in your opinion, sorry, I'm asking a lot of questions here at once, but in your opinion, who was most at fault, and did you think it was always going to come from our left-hand side?
No, I don't think it was always going to come from our left-hand side, because the opposite side had Ndiaye on there, and he was, throughout the game, the more threatening player on the side. So I don't think anyone could have predicted that Idrissa Gana Gueye would be the guy running down the flank to assist, just like even Ampadu did in the last game for us. No one could have predicted that. But in regards to who the fault lies on for the goal, a lot of people have been digging out Tanaka for this one. But I want to give him a bit of praise for even spotting the run from Gana Gueye, because no one else was covering him, and he nearly stopped that ball. He didn't stop it, but he was the only player who was looking to stop that. If Tanaka hadn't have spotted his run and went with him, then it would have been totally unmarked. And yeah, the same thing would have happened, but I think he does have some fault, but he also did good to get there in the first place. Then the other one who got a bit of fault, I think Seb Bornau doesn't do very well with Barry. If you look, I've watched it a few times. If you look at where the players are positioned, like before the ball gets played through to Garnagay, you see that Bornau is ball side of him initially when the ball gets played down the line, and then by the time the ball gets crossed in, Barry is ball side. So so Bornau didn't do his job in stopping Barry from getting ball side of him, and I think maybe he should have done a little bit better in that moment. But he is mismatched a bit pace-wise against Barry. We saw that in the first half. He recovered well from that individual moment, but I do think that he could maybe have done better. So for me, it's on those two. It's on Tanaka a little, and it's also on Bornau.
Yeah, I think it's Bornau mostly. It's his man. Not much else to say on that. And then the thing on Tanaka is like a lot of people are complaining because he kicked the ball out for a throw-in, but in the build-up to this, but it was a bad pass or whatever, but so what? Like, it's so far up the pitch that it shouldn't happen so quickly from that moment that they've managed to get a cross in. We've actually had a few moments like that this season. I'm thinking about Burnley as well, just switching off from a throw-in. Just everyone needs to be a bit tighter with that. So, yeah, it's a frustration, but don't want to blame Tanaka for that part.
Thing that I didn't even realise that was what people were blaming Tanaka on.
That was one of the things, yeah.
Because I didn't even notice it because after that throw-in, the ball had been circulated over to the other side of the pitch.
Yeah.
So it had been circulated around and then circulated back to the right.
I think it's because his ball retention was just lacking, and I think people were just frustrated that he'd put another one out, but is what it is. Question from our lovely editor, Alfie. He says, does this system make our fullbacks look great, or are they just really quite good? I'm going to personally quickly go very first on this. I think they're pretty good. There's much else to say. I quite like all of them. There is the rough with the smooth with players like Bogle. Bogle did get done a couple of times by Njai, quite naughtily from Njai. Like, he's a really good dribbler, isn't he? And really fun on the eye. So fair enough. Like, I'm not going to complain too much. Just another really solid game, out of position, and still playing more than well enough. I prefer him probably as a centre back in a 3 than I do as a left wing back, but scored a goal. Actually had 4 shots in the first half, which was the most of any player. Had 5 overall in the game because he had that header towards the end. We only had 14 shots, so he's had over a third of our shots in the game, which is fantastic. And we all know how good Gabriel Goodmanson is in so many different ways, even if sometimes his final ball lacks a little bit, which he hasn't scored or assisted this season. And Justin's got 2, and Bogle's got 2 goal involvements as well himself. Gustafsson needs to do something there. I think it's kind of a bit annoying, but is what it is. And then he obviously has the tendency occasionally to switch off a little bit in defensive areas, when he's got a marker on his shoulder and stuff like that. But generally speaking, like you said, none of these players are going to be perfect. They're all going to have some deficiencies, but all of them look at least capable at this level. All of them are aged between 25 and 28. So we're going to have them for a good few years yet, hopefully. And I think they're a good set of lads too, Martin.
Yeah, 100%. I do think that our system does put a lot of emphasis on the wing backs, and that they use a lot to get the ball forward with Goodmanson on the left with his ball carrying has been excellent. Bogle with this combination play and passing, which is a little better on the right side. So you've got a good set up there of fullbacks who are very good for our position as a team who's just entered the Premier League. And yeah, we could definitely have worse than them, in my opinion. So yeah, I'm very happy with them all, and they all seem like you say, really good characters.
Yeah, and then just one last point on Bogle, which is he was getting into really, really good positions in the first half, like constantly. Like, he had that moment where he probably could have shot, didn't, went for a cross instead when he got into the box. And we just kept finding him in good areas, and that was great. But then I really wanted him to have a bit more combination, a bit of a player to kind of play off a little bit, because Bogle's at his best when he's had someone like a Gnonto or Dan James to combine with. He's not done as well with Aronson, and Aronson was the only other forward other than Calvert-Lewin. So we needed a midfielder to have a moment where they were out of position, and if we'd messed up the attack, it would have been a problem perhaps. But we needed a player to step out and give him some support. And the moment that happened, we got a goal from it. So that was obviously Stack pulling out wide to join in with the press. Him and Bogle managed to win the ball between them teeny bit of a foul, but only a teeny bit. And then they play a couple of nice passes between them, really well executed, stacks in space, puts it across, gets the assist for the Justin goal. Just fantastic. We haven't even talked about a goal, but that was really nice. I really liked that combination play. And this is why I actually think maybe a 3-4-3 might be good in some games, and having two wide tens, it could be Aronson and Buonanotte, but just for the wing backs to combine with a bit more, I think that would be really good for them. Stack did well here to pull out, but like he needs to be in the central spaces and being able to drive forward into central areas more, in my opinion, than having to do that. So yeah, really, really good from Bogle and Stack on that one. Hosty then asked, our lovely friend and one of our podcast buddies, about Stack. He said Stack's role in the first half out of possession, and how did Everton's changes combat that to their advantage? He wanted to know about this. In their first half, I felt Stack was shadowing Njai, not so much man marking, but positioning himself to cut off the lanes to him. In the second half, Njai got the ball more. So how did the changes disrupt Anton Stack?
So I don't think there was anything in particular which impacted Anton. I think it was more just that he got tired, to be honest. I think that's the main thing which interrupted him. And also when he picked up that yellow, that meant he had to be a bit more cautious in his defensive actions because he didn't want to get a second yellow. So I think that was the main thing for me. Most of the good stuff that he was doing was out of possession in the first half, with some obviously in possession that he was doing, which was nice, but most of it was out of it. And we weren't in a position where we could forward press as much in the second half because of the way Everton had made their changes, and that meant that it was more bodies for the players to cover, and it made it more difficult for Stack to win balls. So I guess that could be the change which made it tougher for Stack, but I do think it's more on the fact that he was tired. He's just come back from an injury, so yeah, I think at that point he just maybe needed to get taken off about 10 minutes earlier than what he actually ended up being taken off.
Yeah, I really don't have anything to add. I think that's pretty much spot on. I think it is just a fatigue or physical thing rather than anything else. We then had a question from another one of our podcast buddies, Will. He said it's quite long, so we don't have to read it all out. Oh, you said that. I guess a bit about squad usage, maybe. We barely used Tanaka recently, so no surprise when he comes on, he looks not the best. Maybe there's a bit of an issue with sharpness there, but that might be beating a dead horse by now. Maybe Aronson as well and his decision making. We'll talk about that in a second. But on Tanaka, let's go there first. Sorry, I'm really out of it because I'm trying to get this finished in a good time. But yeah, let's talk about Tanaka because he's been criticised quite a lot for this one. Whereas Stack, it is interesting how certain players are perceived. I'm not saying this is a Tanaka and Stack comparison, but I find it really quite interesting that Stack is like, oh, poor baby, he's tired, like he's leggy. And yet, if the same player wasn't his complexion, it might not be that, oh, he's tired. It might be, oh, he's lazy. Stack never gets called lazy, does he? I only see that he looks leggy or he looks tired, he looks laboured, he looks like he's blowing at 70 minutes. I see that a lot. But it's interesting. Anyway, I'm tangenting. Let's talk about Tanaka. Because he was criticised quite a bit here, Martin. Did you think it was warranted? Do you think it was fair?
So, yeah, with regards to Tanaka, and I think Will's question was more about the general squad usage. But yeah, I think Tanaka's not played a whole lot of minutes recently. He's had to deal with substitution appearances for a few weeks now. Really, I can't remember. Was the last game that he started in the Cup against Derby? Yep. I'm trying to think the last one before that in the league.
Brentford.
Brentford, yeah, that was some time ago now. So, yeah.
And he made a mistake. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's frustrating because I do think that Tanaka's mistakes are highlighted a lot more than other squad members' mistakes, and focus on more when Farker especially is judging them. When you've got players like Ampadu who have been excellent in the past couple of games, but we have noticed lots of individual mistakes that Ethan Ampadu has made, which directly cost goals, and Tanaka makes one mistake in that Brentford game and gets bombed out of the squad. So yeah, it's not the greatest look, and it's not a surprise that now that he's been out of the squad for a bit, when he does step into the game, he's not up to speed and he's not at his best because he's not been getting the game time that he's been used to for these past 18 months while he's been with us.
Phrase we used at the end of last season, if I remember right, it was half-baked.
Yes. Yeah.
He's undercooked. He's half baked. He's not quite as ready as he should be.
Exactly, yeah, and I think that's the case with Tanaka. I don't think it's quite the same with Nyonto. I think with wingers and the more attacking players, it's generally a bit easier to cope with lack of minutes because it's it's these individual moments that the players are good at. Whereas with Tanaka, it's more of a cohesion thing and not being used to his teammates. I feel like I can get myself across wrong, but I know what I want to say. And Tanaka especially is suffering with this at the moment, and it makes me sad because he's one of my favourite players in this squad,
Me too.
and I want to see him being judged fairly by his manager and being held to the same standards as the other players who are playing more minutes than him, but have had bad moments themselves. If we're speaking about players above him who haven't made a single mistake all season and hadn't cost us points or goals, then fair play. But that's not the case. Grueva's made mistakes, Ampadu's made mistakes. Every single player in this team has made mistakes, but it's Tanaka who seems to be paying for one that he made, which, yeah, I'm sure he was self-critical enough of himself anyway, without having to be bombed out the squad in the way that he has been for this. So yeah, it frustrates me.
I think when you're like getting so few minutes, you almost force yourself as well to try more stuff and to probably like try and impress. And that's not a good position to be in. You want to be able to come in and the environment's fine and you can kind of just be stable. But like that pass he tried to force between the lines for Calvert-Lewin in the left channel of the box, like he executed it poorly, yes, but like I can see why he's tried it because he wants to impress. He wants to try and get a goal involvement or a shot away at the very least for Calvert-Lewin or something to impress the manager. And that doesn't help. He had 60% pass accuracy when he came on, only 10 passes, but still, a lot of players were a lot better than that, a lot more secure. I think there's a lot to be said of what you said about his position and probably needing rhythm. I think that's probably what you were looking for. Like, you're getting rhythm by the minutes and also by the passes you're playing. It's not the position where you're out wide and you can try a bit of a stupid pass because you're just flinging one into the box and it might come off because it's fine because we're in the box. It's not a dangerous area. Tanaka's almost the conductor, has to control the game. If his rhythm's off because he's not playing a lot and he's half baked, then it's not the greatest environment for him to come into. And yeah, do you know what else is frustrating about Nyonto? And both Paul and Tommy won't mind me reading their comments out because they were perfect in the Discord. Said, he came on Nonto against Liverpool, won a penalty, came on against Brentford, got a brilliant assist, scored in the cup game as well. What's his reward? He's benched and down the pecking order behind players like Okafor. And then Tommy said, it's maddening regarding Nonto because he makes stuff happen and always has done. Totally agree. And like we just said, he's more a difference maker, so you can't just fling him in. And Okafor's kind of the same as well. Like you just fling them in and hope that they make something happen as forward players. But that's not quite the same for Tanaka. His role is definitely very different and very specific. I just want to make one more point on this because I don't want to dig players out too much, but I didn't like Gruev's performance here. He made 2 defensive contributions in the entire match as a defensive midfielder. And if people don't really know what the context of that is and like how poor that is in the match, Okafor came on and made 3, Buonanotte came on and made 2, Tanaka came on and made 5. People think he played poorly, but he made over double what Gruev did. Ampadu and Strauch were our 2 highest players for this for 17, stacked with 16. Like, that's the kind of level the players around him in his area that played a lot of minutes. He should have easily got 10 plus. He got 2. So what's his actual his role? Is it just ball retention? Okay. He did have one of the highest pass accuracies in the entire team. I think at 87 or 88%. I think it was the second or first most. Great, but there were moments where he probably could have passed forward and didn't in both halves. There were moments where he could have been a bit tidier with that. There are other things with Gruev that don't show up on the stats, and I'm stealing Will's point, not Will Clay, Will N in the Discord, his point, because it was a really good one, about Gruev and how he slows the game down because he's very one-footed. He likes to be a certain orientation with his body to play certain passes, and he takes time to get there. There are little things like that. I think Gruev's probably one of the most overrated players in our squad. I think there's a lot of fans that are happy to say, oh, well, look at what happens when Tanaka comes in and Gruev's on the, he's taken off and he was the one who started. I don't know. Feels to me like a bit of outcome bias. I don't actually agree with that. I think Gruev was pretty poor in this game, particularly in the second half, but a little bit in the first as well. Didn't do much for me whatsoever. I think they're both potentially upgradable in the summer for different reasons, but I don't want to hear anyone say like that Gruev's a better player than Tanaka, because he's not. Like, he has a specific role in this team positionally that works just in front of the back four a lot of the time, but he's not even getting through a lot of defensive work quite often, like we saw here. And so that almost makes that point redundant. And it's not just a Tanaka defense. It's like I'm a bit sick of the overpraise of Gruev at the moment and the overplaying of him. Having said that, Martin, do you agree that maybe Longstaff was the sub, not Tanaka, in terms of the profile at the time?
Well, I think there was more than one sub that was needed at that time.
I agree.
So I think even if you had brought Longstaff on at that point, I don't think it would have made much of a difference, to be honest. It may have made a little bit more sense, but we needed more than one sub at that point. Not just him was going to stem the tide that was against us at that point. We needed at least two subs on there, in my opinion. Someone even like Nemecha, along with Tanaka, could have been a good positive sub to make there. Someone who can play alongside Calvert-Lewin, help us stretch the pitch a bit more and get the ball forward to. And yeah, just Tanaka by himself, made it really difficult, I think, because all the focus was being put on Tanaka then. Despite the good stuff that he was doing out of possession, like you say, he made 5 defensive contributions in the 30-minute play when he was on the pitch.
25, yeah.
Yeah. So in that short amount of time, but the focus is always going to be put on Tanaka with what he does with the ball, because that's what everyone knows him for. So when he does misplace a pass, it's highlighted him a lot more than, say, Brendan Aronson misplacing a pass. Although, this is quite a funny little stat. He mentioned Ilya Gruev and his pass completion being one of the highest. Brendan Aronson had a higher pass completion in this game than what he did, which is quite funny because that's not something that that you would associate with Brendan Aronson. He had an 89% pass completion. And
his dribbling was not the best.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't, and I think that actually brings us nicely into the next question. So the next one is on Brendan Aronson, and he was really a game of two halves personified here. In the first half, he was excellent, really good, made all the right decisions, just for the goal especially. Brendan Aronson of 6 months ago would have tried to take a shot there on the goal, and it would have got saved, and then would have won a corner, say. But this one, Brendan Aronson noticed that Justin was coming onto it, sort of guarded the ball a little bit and waited for him to come onto it, and then just backed off, gave him space. So yeah, very well done, Brendan. But then in the second half, where he was trying to take on players too much, and in situations where we couldn't afford to lose a ball, just little things like that where he wasn't making the right choice. And yeah, it was night and day between the first half, Brendan, and the second half. Yeah, he's going to have moments where he doesn't do well, and maybe the squad that was on the pitch wasn't the best for him to platform well. And because of the changes that Everton made and the changes we didn't make, it meant that every player on the pitch job was a little bit more difficult. And potentially, if you bring on Buonanotte and you bring on Tanaka and Longstaff and fit that sort of squad around Brendan, then maybe his second half would have looked better when he's got more players to bounce off. And I think that's where he shines, is where he does have players around him who can work with him and take up space, but there wasn't really anyone else ahead of him. So it did make his life difficult, but he did also at the same time make some bad choices.
Yeah, like you said, the dribbling in the first half and the timing of the release with those dribbles and when to give it to someone else, perfect. In the second half, it was, I'm going to dribble out of my own area and in my own half, I'm going to try and drag the ball all the way to the halfway, and it just didn't work. So that was a bit of stupidity, but it's fine because, as you say, he was really good in the first. What I will say on the goal is, do you think he means to shield that the whole way to Justin, or do you think he's caught in two minds of like, oh, I could shoot here? Justin then shouts at me, he goes, I could still shoot, and then goes, no, I'll let him shoot. Which do you think it actually is? Because I'm not sure.
It's a bit 50-50. I think maybe at first he was trying to position himself to get a shot, but then he may have heard or saw Justin out the corner of his eye coming into the box and thought that he would be a better position to run onto it and shoot, whereas he was motionless, or nearly motionless while he was following the ball. So it just made more sense for a player running onto it to shoot.
I agree. And then the final part, because that was another bit from Will, actually, that Brendan question. But the final part of Will's question was about Jacobiel and Gabriel Gubbins. And we probably should have done this in the news section, but oh well. And them being out. And if it's a good time for them to be out, as they'll be back against teams where they'll actually make a difference. I think a lot has been made of how good our form is now. We have got 15 points from the last 10 games, top half of form in that time. That's really good. But the next 5 are against, Arsenal, Villa, Chelsea, Man City, and then the one home game that looks kinder is Forest. But, for Arsenal and for Chelsea, which are the two of the next 3 with Forest, they're missing those 2 plus Forest. Is it not too bad? And then they're back for the really kind of run just after that, which is not the Villa and City games, but the Sunderland, Palace, Bournemouth, Brighton run that we've got that's much, much kinder on paper.
Yeah, I do agree that it is probably better for them to miss these next 2 games against Arsenal and Chelsea than it would be for the games after that against Forest, because as good as they are, as a whole, it's going to be very difficult for us as those games. The game against Arsenal, considering it being at Elland Road, I think at the moment, with the way we set up, we can cause more problems for the top end teams than we sometimes can against the bottom, because we built transition more, go direct. So who knows? But I'm still not expecting anything other than a loss in those games. But if we get anything from them, great. But yeah, those players aren't going to make as much of a difference in that game as they will against the quote unquote easier games following them.
Yeah, the one caveat is that Arsenal's attacking set pieces are pretty frightening, and Dion might be our best defender at blocking / heading those kind of situations out. So having him out is a little bit of a shame for that one. Goodmanson I'm less bothered by for the Arsenal game in particular. I don't think it's going to be a fantastic one. In fact, Justin might do a decent job on Saka, being able to defend on his strong foot, on Saka's strong foot, if that makes sense. Any other struggles in this match against Everton need a mention, Martin, or can we move straight on to man of the match and the standout players?
Yeah, we can move on. I think we've covered the underperformance on this one.
I think there were 5 players for me then that really, really deserve a shout out for this game. One of them, I'm not going to go in any particular order until the very end. The first 3 players in particular, just good players I thought performed well. Really liked Calvert-Lewin. The duels were just immense. I probably should get the data up on that. I thought he was really, really good here. In that sense, it doesn't actually show up in terms of if you look at a FOTMob rating, which again I don't like very much, but I always bring them up. I seem to on these pods. I still think he stands out because he does so much for the team, and data doesn't always pick that up for strikers. He contested in total, in terms of duels, the most in the game with, doesn't give me an overall stat, that's annoying.
17,
and he didn't win loads of them, but he did put himself about, so I really like that. In terms of the other 4 players, I think Justin deserves another shout for playing out of position again and doing well, scoring a goal. Just really competent performance, even though he didn't have as much to work with in terms of a wing partner, as I mentioned before. And then the 3 main ones, I think, are Stack, who got the assist, and for the first 70 minutes was brilliant. But the 2 main ones are actually, I think, Ethan Ampadu or Pascal Struijk. I will hand over to you to talk about Ethan Ampadu and whoever else you've got as man of the match, because I'm sure he ranks pretty high for you. I'm going to save myself for Struijk because, honestly, one of his best performances for Leeds this season.
Yeah, I agree with all of what you said there, and those players would have been the same ones that I would have mentioned as well. I think for me, the 2 is Ampadu or Struijk. Those 2 were both excellent in this one. Stack was also excellent for the first half, but he did tire in the second, so you can't really include him in the conversation for man of the match, in my opinion. But for me, it's a hard one, because I do like both Ampadu and Struijk, but I'm going to go with the all-stat stat were your favourite and give it to Pascal, because he didn't really put a foot wrong in this one. There was that one moment where he could have got back a little bit quicker later in the game. I forget which moment it was, but outside of that, he was excellent. And
he also slipped at one point, which was a bit frustrating. Yeah. But I can never, ever really criticise a player for slipping unless they're being stupid with the ball themselves and then they slip. If it's just the floor is slippy and they slip on that spot, it's just a bit of bad luck, isn't it? Do you want
Yeah,
some
exactly.
stats on Strauch? Because he's my
Go for
pick
it.
as well. Normally this is you, but I'm in the zone today. 17 defensive contributions is the most in the match, alongside Ethan Ampadu. He also completed the most passes for us. We had a few players in the match have more passes completed than Strauch's 45, but he was the most for a Leeds player. In terms of duels, this is where he really tipped it for me, because I was pretty 50-50 between Ampadu and Strauch, but then I looked at this. He contested 10 duels and won 9 of them, which is fantastic. You can't ask for much more. And he was against a guy that's bigger than him in Barry, but every time apart from one that he went up to challenge him, he won the ball. He was magnificent. He put himself about. He was the only centre back of the 3 in the first half that didn't make an error in build up. The other 2 made at least a one each, probably a couple. So yeah, I just really loved his performance here. One of his best in a Leeds shirt, and actually, funnily enough, one of his other really good performances this season was against Everton in the first game. So he's clearly been really, really good against them in both games, and that's credit to him. He's still quite underrated by Leeds fans, but I think he deserved that shout out. Ampadu would be my second, as a very close second, and probably Stack as third. But yeah, I thought Strout was brilliant here. You actually rewatched more than I did. Did he stand out still on the rewatch just as much?
Yeah, he did. I think that another player who I haven't mentioned as well on top of Strauch was James Justin. I thought he was excellent on his weaker side. That should be noted, but he combined really well on that flank. He had the most touches inside the box for us, which is pretty good. Good going. Yeah, one of them was a shot, of course, and then the other ones were just I'm not sure what, but yeah, he was definitely combining well on that flank, and he was occupying the central spaces quite often. I think that seems more natural given that he is stronger on his right foot than his left foot, so it makes more sense for him to come in field more. But yeah, Pascal was excellent and just really imperious in the air, made Tierno Barry's life miserable at points, and really did do a good job on him. Obviously, he wasn't his man for the goal. Maybe if he was picking him up, he may have got the better of him in that moment. I feel. Don't want to put Bernard down any more than we already have on this pod, but because Bernard did as well, had some good moments in this one, and it was definitely a 50-50 game for him as well. In the first half, he had some really good moments as well. A couple of bad build-up moments that wasn't just him. Darlow didn't help him in those moments, I feel. But yeah, Strauch was excellent in this one and deserving of man of the match for me. But Justin, it wasn't far behind.
No, that's totally fair as well. All right, I think that's everything for today because Martin does have to go. So we're going to close here. Patreon.com/ASAW Patreon is where you can find all our bonus stuff that we mentioned at the top of the podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube, leave us a review or whichever podcast player you're listening to on, and a comment on whatever you listen to us on as well. That'd be great. It really does help us out. Yeah, that's always time for tonight. We'll be back to preview the next game against Arsenal soon. I don't know who's going to be on that one yet, but we'll work it out. And yeah, we might have someone sign at some point and we'll do something on them too as well. So that'd be good if that happens. There is only about 6 days left of the window, so get busy, Leeds. But also for me to say is thank you very much to Martin.
Thank you as well, Adam.
And thank you, dear listeners. Enjoy the rest of your week. We'll see you soon. Goodbye.